And thank you so much. We have around 13 folks that jumped on. We have a lot of people that registered. We had, I think, around 45. So I'm hoping more folks trickle in as we're moving forward. But for those that did join us, thank you so much for joining us. I am really excited to kind of talk about this topic today because we're going to be talking about it a little bit different than we have in the past. I think usually we talk about all the different types of resources. When it comes to financial aid, even though they're limited, we do talk about that. But this, in the last year, Pre-Health Dreamers has really done something different. We've really been focusing a lot on changing schools that don't have resources for students. And so we want to bring that to your attention and kind of provide you a little bit of more guidance on how to do that. We'll be talking about loans. We'll be talking about scholarships towards the second half of the presentation. But I think it's really important for you guys to kind of be brought up to speed on what's happening at the institutions and at the programs, especially when you're going into professional programs such as dentistry, medicine, physical therapy, and so on. So I hope that you guys are able to get some information from here. Also, there are some questions that came in through the RSVP, a handful of them that were a little bit more geared towards undergraduate programs, or very specific to California a school in California. And so what I did is I did a really quick flash Q&A recording that I'm going to be adding that link to the end of the slides. I have a little resource page for you guys. I'm going to be adding it there. So if your question wasn't answered during this webinar, you might be able to find it on that recording, especially it's very specific to a scenario that you're in right now. And it's not financial aid focused. So please know, and if anything, just email us. And just for, I've already met you, or a reminder, but if I haven't, let me just introduce myself. My name is Yari Ortiz. I'm the Executive Director of Pre-Health Dreamers. Again, I'm really excited to be here with you today, and I hope this presentation really helps and provides some insight. So if you're new to Pre-Health Dreamers, I know a lot of you guys are part of our cohort, but if you're not, we are national. We do work with students from all across the country, and we also work with institutions. 50% of our partnerships and students do come from California. However, every year we get more and more students from outside of California. And so usually when we do get a lot more students from outside of California, especially southern states, we have to do a lot of advocacy and a lot of different kind of advocacy than we do in California. So we partner with schools, we partner with students, we do advising for both groups, advocacy at both levels. And so we're really trying to grow in both, serving the students and the or the educators, and especially the decision makers at these programs, because I think that's where it really is necessary. So if you don't know very much about us, check us out at phdreamers.org. So a little bit about our program and our students, just so you get a little bit more familiar with us. Overall, a lot of the students that we work with are pursuing medicine. They actually make up over 30% of the population that we serve. After that, it is, it is physician assistant and nursing. And then we also have a lot of students that are going into research. In the last years, or in the last decade, our focus was really medicine. But in the last 2 to 3 years, we've really tried to do a lot more research and advocacy in other programs as students are showing more interest. So that is nursing and dentistry. We're starting to see a rise in dentistry and also pre-med programs. So we might be able to give you some insight of what is going on with these programs. So, and what might be best options, or not just options, but also how to navigate if you choose to go into one of those degrees. We hope to provide some of that information. So before we move forward, I want to give a little bit of an overview of what we've learned in the last years as we're doing research and doing some hands-on work a lot of times we're learning because students are coming to us with questions and we're having to go out there and do the research and talk to programs, network with them and partner with them. And that's how we're able to provide some of the information that we're providing today. So I want to give a little bit of overview on some of the top programs that our students are pursuing and where they stand as far as serving undocumented students. And so let me go ahead and get started again with medicine. We've been working with medicine, medical school, the AAMC, for over a decade. And when we were established, our co-founders, that was the degree that they were pursuing, medicine. So a lot of the work was emphasized around that degree. But thanks to our founders and the teams prior to the one that we have now at Pre-Health Dreamers, they were able to advocate so that more than 50 medical schools accept DACA recipients across the country. We also have advocated so the fee waivers or application fee waivers are made available to students with DACA. First, we went for the DACA students, like, please make this available to them. And then we advocated and we had conversations so that they remove the residency and citizenship question altogether. So the next step for us to do is to continue to do that type of advocacy at other programs. We learned a lot of lessons from that. So now we hope to start implementing those tools and those skills that we learned at other programs. Even though medical schools have gone a long way in knowing how to serve as far as, making the application available to students, we still see that a lot of programs are not providing financial aid. There's still a big gap in that. And so we always have to have conversations with schools early on before students are applying to see how they can better serve them financially and how they can establish financial support for students as well. I think that's a big conversation on how can they better help and how they can better really support the students as they're going in, right? And not letting the student kind of sink or swim, but really help them and be that like little floating device that the student needs in order to be able to move forward. We have been working with dentistry programs. Again, dentistry programs are newer to working with undocumented students than medical schools are. So again, the landscape right now seems from our end that they're more and more welcoming to DACA recipients, but really what that means is that they open the application. Overall, I'm not going to say that there's no schools that provide financial support for their students, but overall, there's still a long ways to go for schools to be able to provide good support and full support, financial aid support for undocumented students. So we're also trying to do a lot of training at dentistry programs. We did do a research to see where we were with dentistry programs and where we had to start at Pre-Health Dreamers as far as training and advocacy. And we sent out actually a survey to dentistry programs. 71 dental schools did return. No, I'm so sorry. We sent out the survey to 71 dental schools. Only 39 responded, but out of those 39, 72% said yes to taking DACA students. But that does not mean that they were providing financial aid. So that's what told us at Pre-Health Dreamers that we really have to go in and do more training, more conversations to really try to help the schools kind of understand why funding is necessary for DACA recipients and for undocumented students and even TPS students, and to how to set those goals and start those conversations. Nursing, we don't see a lot of the nursing programs are at the undergraduate when we're meeting with students, not so much at the graduate and nurse practitioner level. So we're finding that a lot of students, it's not so much the tuition that they're having concerns with, it's like the licensure or the clinical sides. And so we are able to do a lot of that kind of training, but a lot of nursing programs won't accept the student if they don't have a social. Because of the clinical. That's a whole other conversation. I won't go into that because I get very passionate and that'll be another hour. But overall, yes, you can do clinicals without a social and background checks without a social. If you want to learn how to do that, please email us. But usually those are the barriers that we're finding. Physician assistants, physical therapy, pharmacy are even more behind as far as knowing how to support students. Again, it's not to discourage, it's really to hopefully get you guys started in your research early on, and connecting with schools early on and letting them know that, hey, you're a potential applicant to their school. How DACA friendly are they, or how undocumented friendly are they? Have they ever accepted a TPS student? What kind of support do they have? And I really encourage you guys to connect with the schools and really get to know, how they're going to be great partners to you during this 3, 4, 10-year program, depending if you're doing a specialty, right? And so it's really important for you to start connecting, but we're going to talk about that in a little bit. But overall medicine is the one that we see as leading, but there's still ways to go when it comes to financial support. And then as you go down this square, you'll be able to see like financial support with exception to nursing, financial support at the programs dwindle. We found that even with pre-med, post-bac programs, most of the time there's no financial aid there, and they're really expensive programs. So that's why today we wanted to start with this conversation. Again, it's not to scare you, it's really to make you aware of what's going on, not that you don't know already, but it's really to kind of show you the ropes and try to introduce you to something that we've been doing at Pre-Health Dreamers and teach it, over to you. Sorry about that. Bring it over to your end. But let's talk about self-advocacy right now. Self-advocacy is individual's ability to effectively communicate, convey, negotiate, or assert his or her own interests, desires, needs, and rights. And why is this important? It's really important for you to understand what this means and how you can apply it when you're pursuing your degree. And it's really unfortunate that undocumented students don't only have to do well in college or in school, in your grades, in your tests, your admission exams, all of that. I know this is another thing on your plate, but we actually found it to be really helpful as you're moving forward, to learn what self-advocacy is. And really another way to see it is basically asking questions you've never been able to ask, or you didn't know you could ask the school. And when you can ask the school, that's really what self-advocacy is, really asking for more resources for yourself. And these are resources that you're entitled to, that when you're at that school, you're going to be paying tuition. You're going to be paying the same thing that all other students are. So it's really important for you to kind of take that into consideration and own the fact that you do have a right to self-advocate. But we also have to learn how to self-advocate well, and be able to kind of work with the system and talk, their language a little bit. And we'll talk about what that means in a bit. So when should you start talking to schools, or your programs? If you're wanting to apply to medical school, dentistry, pre-med, post-bac programs, and so on, I would really say as early as possible. If you, the worst case scenario, if possible, is a year before you apply to your program. I think that is one of the, best times, if possible, to start. I know not everybody has that. Some of you may already be in your first year of that professional program, whether it's medicine or dentistry. So we can talk about tackling that in a little bit. But if possible, if you're right now still at community college or at a 4-year school and are still thinking about applying, you really want to start talking to schools a year before you start applying. And what does that mean? What does it mean talking to the schools, connecting with them? A lot of the conversation really is about financial aid support. So you want to start talking to them as early as possible, emailing them. You want to research the program and the resources that they provide to undocumented students, and email the campus administrators. I want to kind of make something a lot of folks don't know this or don't understand this, but sometimes I used to be an assistant director at 4-year university, and really the assistant director really has no leverage at a school. we have very minimal leverage. And a lot of times folks think directors, like a financial aid director, has a lot of leverage at a school, at a program, when in reality, we really don't. A lot of the decision making comes from the very top. So the deans, the admin, they're the ones that really are able to make change happen and quickly, rather than an admissions counselor, a financial aid counselor. They're really just going to be able to provide you with the resources that may or may not be available on that campus. But as far as making change happen at the campus, which is what we need for undocumented students in regards to financial aid, most of the time, just the financial aid director or just an admissions counselor is not enough. We really need to be emailing the folks at the top to find out what resources are available at that campus and how, if they're not available, how can they be established, or how can the campus themselves or the program help you connect with those resources? And also, a lot of times we're finding that we're having to educate the administrators. So this gets really tiring, really frustrating, especially for the student, because right now you're worrying about starting the program, you're worrying about your exams. If you're already in the program and don't have financial aid, now you're having to also carry that burden. And that really affects you in so many ways. And so it is kind of difficult to say it. And that's why Pre-Heal Dreamers is always happy to have the conversations with you and the campus together. But the reality is that a lot of times the administrators need to understand and need to learn even the basics. We've talked to equity and inclusion officers from various schools, and even though they're open to the conversation and they have an idea of what being undocumented means and what dreamers mean, at the end of the day, really, they don't know the ins and outs. Like, we're even having to train the Department of Equity and Inclusion. But we really feel that that's really important to be able to make that change happen at that school, to get them on our side, to help them understand what's going on, and why it's really vital and important for them to be able to create or open up resources for undocumented students, including financial aid. But the reason I say that I really encourage you to start early the communications with programs is because a lot of times the programs, one, they need time to learn this information. Two, they need to be able to gather all the resources and the kind of, when you're talking about higher education, you're talking about a very convoluted kind of, place. Like, that means very, you have to have a map to be able to navigate all of the different departments, right? And so a lot of the departments work on their own, very independent of each other. And so a lot of times they're going to need to have conversations and meetings about how do we open up resources for undocumented students, because you're going to need people from financial aid, from admissions, the dean, the funders. You're going to need a lot of folks at the table to be able to have these conversations. So you do need to give them time if they don't have resources already available. So you want to start connecting with your schools. We have one student who has been doing a lot of work with us at the dentistry level. And she's been emailing all of the schools just because she wants to know what the culture looks like as far as dentistry. And she's gotten really good responses as far as, yeah, we'll take DACA recipients, but we have very minimal financial aid. We have other places that are like, we're not going to take the student. So we really have to now really toughen up and have those tough conversations with those programs. But it's also taken time. Sometimes they really lack on getting back to the student. They take their time getting back to us. So that's why we always say, start connecting early on to make sure you give yourself ample time and to make sure you give them ample time to be able to have these conversations and grow the resources. And we've had students that, they went in with no financial aid. They talked to the right people, they talked to the right dean, and all of a sudden there's some funding available from a department or a program or a funder. So again, it's just about asking, asking for that support, asking for that resource. that really your tuition is going to be used also, you're putting into that campus as well. I really also encourage you guys to find a network within your program. And so I always tell students, like, if you have a dream school in mind, contact them. If you have schools around your area where you live now, contact them. And also get a feel for when they're responding to you. Did you email the financial aid director, the dean, and the dean of equity and inclusion? Did you email them? Did they get back to you? Was their email cold, or was it very welcoming and friendly? And you're going to be able to make that decision of, do I continue having conversations with this school or do I not? Is it worth me teaching them and advocating, or do I want to go with that school, even though it's not my first choice? But they were very welcoming and friendly. So at the end of the day, you're going to have to be making that decision of how much you want to advocate. Is it worth it at that school? Would you be happier somewhere else? Maybe that other school was not your dream school, but they're giving you more financial aid. So all of those things really play a big part in kind of you moving forward, and having that support that you need. Always how you can start researching and finding the resources and the right people at your campus or at your program. So always search the school's website, like their search engine. Like when you go and you have that little, like, what do you call it? That little search engine, you'll just put on there, like you can use the terms like
The magnifying glass.
Yes, thank you, Lucy. Yes, you'll just put in there like dreamer, DACA, undocumented. Usually those are the words that would trigger for you to be able to find a DACA page, or a page with information for DACA students, for dreamers, for undocumented students. A lot of times they'll use the dreamer term. So you can search that to see if, one, they have a website, and then you want to find out who the contact person is on that page, because more than likely that's the person who really took the time to advocate for that page to be there. And so they might have a good leverage at the school to be able to support you and be your advocate. And you might find some resources there. A liaison and docu-liaison, a lot of schools may have one now. Or they're starting to have one. And really that's the one person that's been assigned, like you're the go-to person for all DACA recipients, or you're the go-to person for all foster youth. They're the liaison. So you want to see sometimes that liaison is the person that made that DACA page or that dreamers page. And they're the ones that would be the middleman, a little bit of having that conversation between you and the admin, or the person that kind of opens up the doors for those conversations, or they may have some leverage at that school. Some schools are also starting to have undocumented task forces, and these are great in the way that a lot of times they have folks in that undocumented task force that represent different departments. So they probably have somebody from financial aid, somebody from admissions, somebody from the faculty side. And so they're the ones really trying to assess and work on how to better support undocumented students. And really you need to be at that seat, and kind of just let them know, like, hey, I don't have financial aid. And who knows who there will be able to kind of help. Sometimes it's not fast. Again, a lot of times the process at these institutions take a very long time. Because of politics, because of processes, because of liability. There's so many different reasons why. One department can't do something without the permission of another department, who can't make a decision without the other department, and so on. And so a lot of times these undocumented task forces are great because you have one person. It doesn't mean that'll be automatic, but at least you have a team on your side who now knows that you're there, you're needing the support. Get involved with student organizations. Find out if there's other DACA recipients, or there's a student org who's already doing the work, so that you don't have to do it alone. I think there's power in numbers. Unfortunately, a lot of times you might be the first DACA recipient on that campus that you know of. But if you do know of other students that are vocal or that are there and have been doing work, just kind of talk to them and see how they've been able to navigate the system, and how they've been able, if they've been able to get resources. Also, cultural association and centers, sometimes you might be able to find the advisors that might be able or willing to help you and support your advocacy efforts. So at the end of the presentation, I have a link with this personal script. This is what we tell students that they can send. We've made a very general version of it. I think one of the most tiring things about this whole kind of conversation that I'm having with you guys is that it's so exhausting, right? It's really exhausting to have to talk to people and train them and educate them over and over again. What is DACA? What is TPS? Why don't you have a social security number? Why can't you just apply for citizenship? Why can't you just apply for FAFSA? So we have really made a personal script for 3 different categories: individuals with DACA, individuals with TPS, and individuals without a social security number or work permit. So at the end of the slides, and I'm going to share the slides with you via email as soon as we close shop today, you'll find the link to this letter. Some students have taken this letter and modified it and made it very personal. Others have just left it as it is. But it's basically like an email to the dean, the director of financial aid, and the director of equity and inclusion. And you always want to email at least those 3 individuals in the same email about what's going on with you and what concerns you have. Hey, I want to go to your program. I want to go to your school. It's my dream program. This is why I want to go, but these are the concerns I have. There's no, I cannot apply for FAFSA, and this is why. Is there any way that the school can help me? I need, am I going to be seen as an international student, as a domestic student? Because sometimes that makes a difference. Is your institutional aid available to students in my, in my situation? So it's a way for you to start those conversations, and you don't have to continue to explain over and over. We're doing it for you. And again, we're happy to sit down with you and modify this if you need us to. Or sit down and just kind of tackle email by email as they're coming in. The other day, me and one of my staff members, Rocio, we spent a whole hour just replying with a student to her emails from that school, who don't get financial aid. And so, we're happy to do that as well. But you'll get this letter and the resource link at the end. In my whole time in higher education, I've always said, I love students who are advocates and I love students who speak up. But it's also very important to know how to say things and where to say things and when to say things. It's really important to also be strategic and being able to find who you're speaking to and who's the best person to be able to help advocate with you and for you. And so one of the things that I always tell students, when you're looking at this letter here, your personal script, it's always really important to think about the mission of the program. What is their mission? And how does that align to you as a person and why you want to go into the career that you're wanting to go to? Sometimes the mission of that, medical school is, we want to propel more diverse students who are culturally competent and are able to serve, underrepresented or historically low income patients, right? And so how do you fit into that? I know there's one program here in California that their mission is very based on the health professional staying in the Central Valley and working with field workers, which I think is amazing. So how do you as a student fit into that? So it's always really important to know what their mission is and how you fit into it to be able to advocate for yourself. The same thing when you're writing your personal statements, tie it back to their mission, and that'll just make you a better candidate, or more aligned to their program. Because it's also really important. We get this question a lot when we're doing advocacy, especially if the student doesn't have DACA and doesn't have a social security number. Why should we be investing in the student if they're not going to possibly be able to practice? And really, at the end of the day, one, they should not be asking you that. and they should not be saying that. But two, at the end of the day, regardless of DACA or no DACA, health professionals are able to work and provide income generate and are able to work in various ways, not so much through employment, but they are able to generate income in other ways. Independent contracting, private duty. There's so many different creative ways that you can bring in, serve the community and get paid without an actual employment. And so a lot of times it's really understanding all of this and letting them know and teaching them that, because that is one of the big questions that we get. Why should we invest in the student? And so you do deserve to be invested in. We just need to know why and relay that message. So it's just things to think about when you're writing those letters to the schools, and do it well and do it, in a way that, they're gonna like, yes, let's help this person. Look how great they are and they deserve to be here because you do. And I think it's also for the students to kind of feel that, right? I think a lot of times when I'm working with students, it's like, I think one of the hardest things, like, tell me great things about you. And it's like, I see like deer in headlights. It's like, no, really, we need to start practicing and sending those flowers to ourselves. And showing how amazing you are. And I think accepting that and acknowledging that, I think that's a great power in that, because I think we're taught a lot of times, especially coming from immigrant families, like to be very modest and like very humble. But I think there's amazing power in just realizing how great you are, and your power that you have as a student and as a future health professional, and what you can bring to the campus. I think it's a big advantage for you to be able to own that, and really say it with conviction. So let's talk about a little bit about financial aid and institutional funding. So institutional funding is going to vary based on so many things. I think I've already said this, but let's go into it a little bit more. So I'll talk a little bit of California, because a lot of times the folks that we work with are from California. So in California, we do have the California Dream Act, which is the application for financial aid for undocumented students, whether they don't have any, work permit or they have DACA or TPS. Other states have it as well, such as Washington, New York, Texas, Oregon. You can see in the little gray square to the right. Think my right or your right, that little gray square, you'll be able to see other states that have something very, like the California Dream Act that we have here. The only downside is that most of the time, not every time, but most of the time, the funding that you get from California, like Dream Acts like these, the funding is very much geared towards undergraduate level. Some funding may be provided at the graduate level if you're in one of these states, but it can be very minimal, especially if you are attending private institutions. Because the financial aid or the tuition is much, much higher. And a lot of times from these applications, again, a lot of the funding is dispersed to students when they're at their undergraduate. Again, there's some funding at the graduate level, that we call institutional. So like grants, like in California, you have the Cal Grant. A lot of that funding, if not all, is done by the time you're done with your undergrad or your first year of graduate level. So it doesn't follow you as much as we would hope it does. I think things are changing a little bit in California, but I don't see them giving really hefty financial support at the graduate level or professional level. Funding will also differ between public institutions and private institutions. So public institutions, again, they're more affordable, but sometimes they tend to have a lot less financial aid support. Private institutions, especially big private institutions, you always want to look at their endowments or their budgets to see how much money they have. But the private institutions usually tend to have more funding because they have funders giving money all the time. The only thing is, if they're providing scholarships or grants to students from all this funding that they or fundraising that they do, what you want to ask is that, does that have citizenship restrictions? Like, do I have to be a US citizen to apply for that funding? And if they say yes, I really encourage you guys to ask why. Because a lot of times the institutional aid that is fundraised by these schools, they're not tied to federal funding. It's not money that's coming from the federal government. It's money that the institution brought in to be able to provide support to the students. But again, it really takes a little bit of time to be able to educate and ask these questions to the right folks to be able to make these changes happen. Private institutions also, depending on where the school is and who the school is, their endowment or their funding might be smaller or bigger. But we always want to find that out to see kind of like where we stand as far as getting financial aid. Also with scholarships, that's also another one. You might find scholarships that are from the campus, from the program, from the department. You also want to check, why do they have a citizenship requirement? I can't say that enough. Always ask. You be like, hey, I'm a really good fit for this scholarship. However, it has a citizenship requirement. May we know why? I really need this funding. I think it's really great, that it's there, but it's really important for me to know why. And then you can start having those discussions with the program or with the department that's hosting that scholarship. Endowments are really tricky. An endowment is, most schools have an endowment, especially if they've been in existence for a very long time. Endowments are funds of money that the school has kind of like a savings kind of account, where depending on the reasoning for the endowment, that's how they disperse the funding. So some schools, when they create an endowment, it's to give out scholarships to students. Other programs or other campuses, they'll create an endowment to fund faculty or to do research, or students to do research. Others will put it aside for different things, right? So you always want to see, one, how much is in their endowment, two, how do they disperse that money, and how can I get a little bit of that? And so they're giving out financial aid, scholarships through that endowment. We really want to see, like, hey, how can I be able to apply to these scholarships, and how much are they? And if there's a citizenship requirement, again, why? I think one thing we want to kind of, put a little bit of light on is when we're talking about funders. A lot of schools are really nervous, especially in non-DACA friendly states. They're really nervous to sometimes provide funding to students because they're nervous of losing funding from their funders. But in reality, undocumented students, that's just one side of the student, right? Undocumented students can also fall under low income, first generation. So necessarily the endowment doesn't have to or the funders don't have to know the student is undocumented. Really, the student got the funding because he is first generation, because he is low income, because, he is left-handed, whatever the requirement of the scholarship is. So again, it's really about doing a little bit of research and work, and asking these questions to your administrations. Hey, I see you have an endowment that provides scholarships. Do I qualify for that? If not, what can we do to advocate to make those changes happen? But again, it takes time, and that's why I encourage you guys to have those conversations early. I'm not going to talk about international or domestic, what that means, but I can always come back to it if somebody has a question about that. Institutional aid. We talked a little bit about this, so I won't go into a lot more, but usually with scholarships or with, again, institutional aid, there's two versions of it. Sometimes it's need-based. That's whether, it depends on your income. And other times it's merit-based. So not so much on your income, but also on your grades. Sometimes you can apply for both. Sometimes you can apply for one. So look for both at your campuses. Now let's talk about loans. I know this is sometimes a very difficult conversation, but I have some resources for you guys today. And so loans, I have a hate-love relationship with loans. I think most of us do. But as far as loans, some students have been very successful at taking out commercial loans. However, a lot of the companies out there that provide loans or commercial loans, they do require for the individual or the student to have a US citizen or permanent resident cosigner. That is one of the most difficult things. And I don't know sometimes what's more difficult, to find a US citizen or permanent resident to cosign, or find a US or permanent resident who has a high enough credit score and income, because usually that's also a variable, to be able to qualify for these loans. If you're an educator and advisor here with us today, I really want to talk about what do I want to call it? Responsible advising when it comes to talking about loans. And a lot of times I hear financial aid directors or advising pushing students to go get commercial loans. And I just want to bring some awareness around that. And sometimes we don't realize the danger that we're putting students in, or really tough situations. A lot of times I've seen students go and look for a cosigner that is a US citizen or a permanent resident, and sometimes it's not a family member. Right, so now we're telling the student, or we're advising them to go make a contract for a loan that is probably a very high loan, especially that student's going into medical school or dentistry, and have this contract with somebody that they don't know. Potentially that could be a very scary thing for the student. It could be a very down the line, we don't know who the person is. Or we might put the student in a really sticky situation down the line by having them find these co-signers. So I really want to encourage advisors to kind of provide students with like kind of the pros and cons of having co-signers, and then letting the student make the decision. Students, I think they're very, they know loans exist. Undocumented folks have been taking out loans for homes and for cars for a very long time. So these are conversations that the family may be having already. I think it's just really important for us as advisors to take a step back when we're really pushing for the student to go get loans with co-signers of people that they may not know, rather than really taking the time to create resources on our own campus. But with that said, that's just my little caveat with it. But there have been folks that have been taking out loans. If you want to go that route, that's great. There have been folks that have taken loans out from Empower, Discover, Ascent, sometimes from their own university. There's loans available. So ask at your school, there's loans available that you can take out. Usually I encourage folks to look at their schools, because usually with the schools, they don't need a cosigner most of the time. It doesn't mean that some schools won't ask for it. But if you're looking for a loan, I would always encourage you to start with your school and really look at the company if you're going through commercial loan, to see what they what that loan's going to look like in the long run. Just with caution, some of them do have high interest rates, strict payment periods, and that US cosigner will get a lot of folks. So you really want to take the step back and kind of weigh out the cost benefits of things, especially like if you're going to a program where your salary is not as high as others when you graduate. You really want to take out that loan, or is it worth it? And let's just go for it. Just a little bit of example of what's needed sometimes when you apply for these commercial loans. So like for Discover, a student applied, they turned in their social. This one was a DACA recipient. They turned in their social, their updated passport, their work permit, verification of cosigner who turned in their social security number and license, a verification from their school. And it took around 2 months to be able to process all of this. So that's what the process looked like for this specific student and for this specific Discover loan. So it could be similar at other places. So just to kind of give you an idea of what that looks like. What you want to ask a little bit is, what are the interest rates of that loan? Is it variable? What variable means is that interest rate can change. So when you apply for it, it could be lower than later on. Later on it skyrockets or it goes higher. What are the repayment terms? Do I start paying now, or do I start paying after I graduate? And what does this look like for the co-signers, and what criteria do the co-signers need to meet in order to be able to take out this loan? There's one thing called the student loan repayment calculator. That one will let you know if you enter like the amount you're borrowing, if it's $100,000 at, you know, 8% compared to 11%, what does that mean? And what is going to be one, how much am I going to have to pay back? And what does my payment possibly look like? So I really encourage you guys to look at loan payment calculators and put the totals there so that you can get a better idea of what you're getting into when you're signing up for loans. Again, you're going to get this slide, so they're interactive, so you'll be able to click on this, so go back to it. But a little bit of positive news, Pre-Health Dreamers was doing a lot of research in the last months in regards to loans and credit cards and how can we provide this information to students. We actually have a financial literacy webinar we can always host for folks. But we're really excited to be able to find two partners, or they found us actually, to be able to kind of talk about two opportunities that are available for students. One of them is called the Self-Help Dreamer Graduate Loan or Student Loan. Some of you guys may have already heard of this, some of you may have not, but the Self-Help Federal Credit Union has been financing or started financing medical students. I think they've been doing it for a while, but now they've been able to open up more opportunities to students. This Dreamer Graduate Loan is very specific, however, it's for DACA recipients who are going into medical school. The amazing thing about them, though, is that the annual percentage rate is much lower, and this might change. It changes based on how the federal percentage rate is, so it might change a little bit. I think I have an update, but I didn't have time to update it here. But it's always mimics, or it's very close to what the federal percentage rate is. And so the great thing about this one, again, is that's for DACA recipients at a lower interest rate. And your co-signer does not need to be a US citizen. So I think that's a great advantage there. So if you have a parent who is undocumented, they may be able to co-sign this loan. For more details, please contact Self-Help. At the end, we do have their information so that you can just click on it, submit the intake if you're interested in it. I know the loan's going to be available. If it's not available now, it's going to be available in June for folks to be able to apply. And so if there's somebody from Self-Help here, you can please just put that on the chat, that'd be amazing. But Self-Help is really great for folks if you have not been able to find support, or we're already about to start medical school and you haven't been able to secure any financial aid. This is a great thing. Now, I want to keep encouraging, just because you get a loan doesn't mean, we want you to stop advocating. We want you to continue to advocate at your school if possible. We know that's a very big hardship to take on. But if they're able to support you and you're able to minimize the amount that you're borrowing on an annual basis, we really want to try to encourage for you to be able to graduate with the least loans possible. And I know Self-Help probably feels the same way. So please, let's continue to advocate. We can help with that, and we can, even do it for you if you give us the green light. The other one that we have learned of, and they've come to us and they've been so wonderful and gracious to talk to, is social finance. This loan is amazing also. They're just like Self-Help in regards to, and they're funded by Funding You. Social finance helps kind of disperse and process the loans, but they are funded by Funding You. And this one does have a little bit more leeway than Self-Help. Social finance actually provides loans to DACA and TPS recipients. However, they do have an eligible degree. They don't just do for medical school like Self-Help does. Social finance actually funds a wider range of loans or of programs, from nursing to dentistry to medicine. They have a list. Again, you'll get this at the end, or we'll mail it to you. So you're able to click on the eligible degrees, see if it's on there. They even have master's degrees that they do fund. And then they also have the list of eligible institutions. they do want the institution to have, a record of students that they've graduated and have been successful in graduating. So they do require for the school to already have been kind of enrolling and graduating students for a couple of years and not semesters. So you can look up your institution and your degree on this document that we're going to provide for you at the end and see if you're eligible, if it's eligible based on that. And then you can also apply and inquire to see if it's the best option for you. The emails down there is called dreamersgradloan@socialfinance.org. Email them if you have any questions. But I think these are some of the better options. I know, like I said, nonprofit, like, no, we don't want to just market a credit card or a loan, but I think they are a nonprofit that really works. Both of these organizations really work to do some safe lending to students. So we really are excited to bring these opportunities to you guys. So if you guys are starting even dental school or medical school this year, look into them, see if you qualify, for them. But again, let's continue to advocate to make sure we get other funding for you at that school. There are repayment loan programs. A lot of loan repayment programs are not for undocumented students. However, more and more are coming, more and more of them are being established or opening their doors. You just have to do your research in your state and nationwide to see if you can find some. I know in California, we have 2 of them. One of them is Uncommon Good, and the other one is Cal Healthcare. And actually those 2 provide loan forgiveness to various health professionals that are in nursing, medicine, and there's a few other ones. Again, their links are going to be provided at the end. So, getting a loan, it's a very difficult thing to do. It does carry a lot of weight sometimes on folks' shoulder. But if you guys finish your program, one, you're going to have amazing salaries, we hope, knock on wood. And then 2, hopefully you can apply for a loan repayment program. There are caveats that you have to work in specific clinics or specific hospitals for amount of time, work with, usually low income patients, which I think a lot of our students want to do that regardless. And so it's really, look into these, do some research, see if there's some available in your state. And again, more and more folks are wanting to work with undocumented students and DACA recipients. So I see these kind of loan repayment programs opening up in the near future. So please keep an eye out for them. And I always tell students, sometimes you may have to take out a loan, or you may have already taken out a loan. It doesn't always mean that you have to be married to that loan forever. Again, more companies, more programs are opening up that want to lend money to DACA recipients or to TPS recipients. So always keep an eye out for other programs that come up. So you may be able to refinance that loan that you did get that you were not so happy about. Maybe you did get a loan that was at 11% or 18%, and you just carry that weight with you everywhere. Just keep looking for other places where you can possibly refinance down the line, where you might be able to get a lower rate. You can always do that. So just keep yourself kind of in the loop once in a while, down the line if you have free time. Most of us don't anymore, but if you do, keep looking for resources where you can refinance. There's a guide there on Stilt that kind of talks to you about refinancing. So again, getting a loan with a high interest rate is such a difficult thing to do. But if you've already gotten one or there's no other option for you, please know that there may be refinancing options as you move forward. So just keep an eye out on that. And you always want to keep your credit score, better than that, so that you have more options when those refinancing options do appear. Again, we have a training on financial literacy available if you want one. Scholarships, yes, they're everywhere. Like scholarships, look at our website. We have the link provided at the end in a toolkit. Also, as far as scholarships, United We Dream also has a list. Immigrants Rising has a list for scholarships. So you want to look for them. You want to set some time aside I know a lot of times financial aid workshops focus on scholarships. I think once you get into the graduate and professional level, I think it's really hard for me like to like kind of promote scholarships all the time because I know it takes a lot of effort and it takes a lot of time to fill out so many applications when you don't know if you're going to be able to get that funding. And two, sometimes the funding is not that much. When you're talking about medical school and dentistry, your tuition is higher. So you really want to, I really encourage you to kind of, assess the scholarships. Is it really worth it for me? Are they providing enough? Or even if they're not, I do have some free time to apply for it. Make yourself a calendar, what scholarship opens when. Have your statements ready, your personal statements ready, your resume, your CV ready, because most of them ask for the same thing. Always look for references that are going to be available. And another thing, networking at your level, if you're a student, what that means is really getting to know your faculty and your professors, your deans, your financial aid directors, or the directors on your campus, folks that can really testify the type of student you are, your academics, you know, your ethics, who you are as a person, and be able to really provide an amazing reference for you when it comes to these. So talk to those folks, keep their emails. So they can write you a general letter that you can send to various places. Great. Some of these scholarships, sometimes they'll ask for very specific things, details about you, or they'll ask more about your character. So sometimes a more detailed or more a specific letter may not function. They might need something different, but at least you can have them there to kind of have as a reference, like, hey, these professors are able to provide something. Stay in contact with them because you might need them not now, but maybe a year or two from now, and they can still testify for you. Crowdfunding. Again, a lot of students have done crowdfunding. It's going to be up to you if you want to choose this as an option to help fund your program or your degree. A lot of students have done it. There's positives and there's kind of like hesitation around crowdfunding. Sometimes the hesitation is really having to put yourself out there, putting your story out there. There's pros and cons to that. Usually folks that have done crowdfunding and have been very successful on it, it's because they've gone to folks that they know, family members, faculty, their peers, and been able to do fundraising that way. Crowdfunding, sometimes you're able to fundraise something, at least for the first semester to get you through school, and others have been a little bit more. Again, there's great side to it. You can fundraise, you'll see the support coming in. The hard part of it is, again, putting yourself out there, sometimes putting, talk to your family, seeing how they feel about this. This can also be a very difficult thing for them. So looking at it in a positive way helps. But yeah, always going to the folks that you know and starting there to see if they can help support you. Crowdfunding is not a new thing. Crowdfunding was around when I was in high school, which was a while back. But our crowdfunding looked different. We were actually I had to do a 3-ring binder with all my photos, with my CV, and I had to take it door to door, like with people, and that's how we were taught to do fundraising for ourselves for college. So crowdfunding has been around for a very long time. It just looks different now. Now you're out there in the public, you're on Instagram, you're on social media, so your story is out there in the world. So it's really about you and how comfortable you feel that way and doing it in a way that's going to work. But some students have done that. So I know we're over the hour, but this is the resource page that I keep talking about. I kind of made like an easy way for you guys to find the resources that I talked about during our presentation. I talk about self-help and social finance. Those are the 2 loan products that exist. Again, self-help is just for DACA medical students. Social finance is a little bit more broad to DACA and TPS students, and they fund other programs other than medicine. I also have a little homework for you guys if you want to take the challenge. There's a budgeting and finance document that we use with our students. So that one you can look at how much is the school going to cost, how much is books, how much is, all of the different tools I'm going to use for my medical school, or, the program you're going into, rent, traveling, all of that. And so that you can kind of take a look and see how much it's going to cost. and then start preparing for that. Also that advocacy letter I showed you earlier, there's also a copy of there for you to review. You can, download it first and then you can modify it. Don't modify it on the link I share with you because that's going to be available to everybody. So make a copy of it, then you can modify, take off what you don't feel comfortable with, add anything that you want to add about it. You can personalize and make in your own. There's also a lending tree link. That one also talks about loans for DACA recipients. So take a look at it and hopefully you're able to learn more than what I was able to provide today or get more information. Because really this topic kind of talks a lot about, this topic we can talk about hours and hours and hours. I'm really giving you a really quick run of how to navigate these conversations. But then I also put other stuff on there like the repayment loan program, financial resources that we have found as far as like scholarships. We also have a YouTube channel at Pre-Health Dreamers, so take a look at it. It'll give you more resources. I don't remember we have the financial literacy one on there, but if we don't, I'll see if I can put a copy of it up there for you guys. So keep kind of babysitting that link and seeing what new videos pop up. We have a lot of great videos on there that our staff has taken the time to record this year and publish on there. And then when I send you guys the slides, again, I'm going to repeat this. I said it in the beginning. When you guys RSVP, a lot of folks submitted questions. A lot of them were very specific to undergraduate or California schools or California school specific. So I wanted to make this a little bit more broad to kind of work with all folks that came on because we have folks from that nationwide. And so the Q&A video, I did like a quick Q&A flash answer questions that are not included in this PowerPoint. So I'm gonna upload that video so that you guys can also look that up. So hopefully if I didn't answer your question right now in the last hour, it'll be answered there. So again, all of this is gonna be emailed to you and hopefully it's been helpful. Again, we kind of wanted to bring information more on how you can find funding at your school rather than just scholarships, even though they do exist. Go on there. There's so many organizations that do it. You'll get the link to some of those on this slide deck. And so we just wanted to give you a little bit more of hindsight of how schools have been working and how you can kind of navigate those conversations. They're not easy, but there's more and more schools open to these conversations. They just take time. But if done well, you'll find folks that are willing to help and leverage their title or who they are at the university to be able to support. So please take a look at the slides. Feel free to email us or feel free to email me at yadi@phdreamers.org. And I can always schedule an appointment with you guys to talk a little bit more in depth, or if you have a little, a more specific question, please feel free to go ahead and ask me. And can we stop the recording, Flavia?